She spent years hating him, until her son's survival depended on his DNA. "You're asking me to trust the man who destroyed my life." Anaya's voice trembled with barely contained fury as she faced Theodore across their son's hospital bed. "The man who stole from dying children and disappeared like a coward." Theodore's hands shook as he reached toward the pale 8-year-old boy between them. "Anaya, please. I know what I did was unforgivable, but he's my son too." "Don't you dare," she hissed, stepping protectively closer to Kai. "You lost the right to call him your son the day you chose money over everything we built together." Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where love stories get complicated, hearts get shattered, and sometimes, just sometimes, they find a way to heal stronger than before. If you're new here, I'm your storyteller, and today I'm bringing you a tale that will challenge everything you think you know about forgiveness, second chances, and the impossible choices we make for the people we love. Before we dive into this emotional journey together, take a moment to hit that like button if you believe in the power of redemption. And if you're ready for a story that will have you questioning whether some betrayals can ever truly be forgiven, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Drop a comment right now and tell me, when someone breaks your trust completely, is there ever a point of no return, or can love really conquer all? I read every single comment, and your thoughts always add so much depth to these stories. Now, let's get back to the story. The rain drummed against the hospital windows as Anaya sat in the sterile waiting room, her fingers tracing the edges of a medical pamphlet she'd read countless times. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Bone marrow transplant. Genetic compatibility. Her son, beautiful, brilliant Kai, lay 3 floors above, his 8-year-old body fighting a battle that medicine could only assist, not win for him. The doctors had been clear. Without a compatible donor, his chances dwindled with each passing day. "Mrs. Laurent?" Dr. Hoffman's weathered voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She looked up to find the oncologist's face creased with the kind of expression that preceded life-altering conversations. "We found a match," he said, consulting his tablet carefully. "The compatibility is exceptional, better than we typically see even between siblings." Relief flooded through her so suddenly that she gasped. "When can we contact them?" Dr. Hoffman's hesitation lasted only seconds, but in that brief silence, Anaya felt the universe shift. "The match is Kai's biological father." The waiting room seemed to tilt. "Are you certain?" "The genetic markers are unmistakable." Theodore Delacroix. Theodore. The name she'd spent 7 years trying to forget hit her like a physical blow. The man who'd once promised her the world, then stolen her universe and disappeared into the night. Complicated didn't begin to describe what Theodore had done to her. She remembered their perfect love story, meeting at the Foundation's gala where he'd been photographing the event, his smile lighting up the darkest corners of her heart. "You have the most beautiful eyes," he'd said, adjusting his camera. "They tell stories." 3 months of romantic courtship followed. Theodore surprised her with picnics, gallery openings, nights spent planning programs for the children they served at the Foundation. She'd fallen in love not just with his charm, but with his apparent dedication to helping sick kids. When he'd proposed in the Foundation's garden, surrounded by flowers planted by the children they served, she'd said yes without hesitation. But it had all been a lie. The investigation revealed a sophisticated embezzlement scheme spanning nearly a year. False invoices, phantom vendors, carefully manipulated records. Theodore had stolen over $500,000 from children who desperately needed every penny. Even worse was realizing their entire relationship had likely been part of his plan. As the Foundation's program coordinator, Anaya had access to the financial records Theodore needed to make his scheme work. The day she discovered the truth, she'd confronted him in their shared apartment, bank statements spread across their kitchen table like evidence of a murder. "How long?" she demanded. "How long have you been stealing from them?" Theodore had stood in their doorway, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally resignation. 11 months. But I was going to pay it back. I swear I had a plan." "Your plan was to marry me and keep stealing from dying children?" "What I feel for you is real, Anaya. The marriage, that was real. Nothing about you is real." The words had torn from her throat. "Every day for almost a year you looked me in the eye and lied. You held me, made love to me, talked about our future, all while destroying everything I cared about. Let me make this right," he pleaded. "You stole from children with cancer, Theodore. How do you make that right?" That night she'd heard him packing. When she woke the next morning he was gone. No note, no explanation, no attempt at reconciliation. Just empty closets and silence. 2 weeks later she discovered she was pregnant. Now, sitting in Dr. Hoffman's office, she stared at the address written in careful handwriting. Theodore Delacroix, 47 Maple Street. The man who'd destroyed her faith in love was living less than an hour away from the son he'd never known existed. The irony wasn't lost on her. After 7 years of raising Kai alone, Theodore's DNA was the only thing standing between her boy and death. She drove through rain-soaked streets to a neighborhood that straddled gentrification and its grittier past. Number 47 had a red door that needed repainting and a small garden someone tended with obvious care. Marigolds bloomed defiantly against the approaching winter. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, gathering courage to face the man who'd broken her heart and now held her child's life in his hands. When she finally knocked, the door opened and there he was. Theodore Delacroix. 7 years had added lines around his eyes and silver to his dark hair, but he remained devastatingly, heartbreakingly familiar. Anaya. Her name left his lips like a prayer and a curse. Hello, Theodore. He stepped aside wordlessly, leading her into a living room that surprised her with its simplicity. Books lined makeshift shelves, a guitar leaned against one corner, and photographs covered every surface, but not the kind she expected. These were portraits of children, candid moments captured with an artist's eye. Kids laughing, concentrating, sleeping peacefully in hospital beds. You're still taking pictures, she observed. It's how I make my living now. Freelance work, mostly. His voice carried careful neutrality. Why are you here, Anaya? She had rehearsed this moment, planned exactly how to present the facts clinically. But standing in his living room, the words lodged in her throat. I have a son, she said finally. Something shifted in Theodore's expression. Understanding, hope, fear all at once. Is he? Yours? Yes. His name is Kai. He's 8 years old and he's dying. Theodore sank into an armchair, gripping the worn armrests. Dying? Leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and you're the only compatible donor we've found. The clinical language felt safer. The doctors say the genetic match is exceptional. 8 years old, he repeated as if testing the weight of the words. God, Anaya. I never knew. If you had known what? You would have stayed? Stolen money from sick children with a clear conscience because you had your own child to think about. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Which part, Theodore? The embezzlement or abandoning me? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. You have every right to hate me. I've spent 7 years hating myself, trying to make amends. I don't care about your redemption arc, Theodore. I care about my son. Will you be tested? Will you help him? Of course. The answer came without hesitation. When? How soon? Tomorrow if possible. Time is. She couldn't finish the sentence. I'll be there. He moved closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. Can I ask, what's he like? The question undid her. How could she describe Kai? The way he hummed while drawing, his obsession with astronomy, his dreams of discovering planets where grass grew purple. He's brilliant, she said softly. Curious about everything. He wants to be an astrophysicist, says he's going to discover new worlds. Her voice caught. He's brave. Braver than I am. Theodore's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. He sounds wonderful. He is. She stepped back toward emotional safer ground. The hospital needs you there by 9 tomorrow morning. Dr. Hoffman's office on the 5th floor. As she turned to leave, one question haunted her. Theodore? Why didn't you take more? From the foundation. You had access to everything. Why only $500,000? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Because I kept thinking I'd figure out a way to put it back. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I'd make it right somehow. He looked at her with 7 years' worth of regret. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't change anything. You're right. It doesn't. But as she drove away, she found herself thinking about the marigolds in his garden, still blooming despite the dying season. Tomorrow, the man who'd broken her heart might save her son's life. The question was, could she survive being grateful to the person who taught her that love was the most dangerous game of all? The bone marrow extraction was scheduled for the following week. Anaya spent the intervening days shuttling between the hospital where Kai underwent preparatory treatments and a world that continued moving despite her universe tilting off its axis. She didn't tell Kai about his father. How could she explain that the man who could save his life was the same one whose absence had shaped every birthday, every Father's Day, every moment when other children talked casually about their dads? Instead, she told him they'd found a donor, that the surgery was scheduled, that everything would be all right. "Mom," Kai said one afternoon as she helped him with homework, "are you scared?" At 8 years old, Kai had learned to read the complicated expressions of adults. She looked up from math problems to find him studying her with sharp intelligence that made him seem older than his years. "A little," she admitted. "But I'm more hopeful than scared." "Because of the donor?" "Because of you. Because you're the strongest person I know." Kai considered this seriously. "Do you think the donor is a good person?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Theodore had been capable of profound kindness. She'd seen it in how he'd once worked with the Foundation's children. But he'd also been capable of devastating betrayal. "I think people are complicated," she said carefully. "Sometimes good people make terrible choices. But that doesn't mean they can't also do beautiful, important things. Like saving someone's life? Like saving someone's life." That evening she found herself in the hospital chapel, a small room with simple wooden benches and stained glass windows casting colored light across the floor. "Mrs. Laurent?" Dr. Hoffman stood in the doorway, his white coat wrinkled from a long day. "I wanted to update you on the donor's test results," he said, sitting beside her. "The compatibility is even better than we initially thought. Nearly perfect, the kind of match we might see between identical twins." Relief flooded through her, followed by complicated emotion she couldn't name. Theodore's DNA was now Kai's best hope for survival. "When will the procedure happen?" "Thursday morning. The donor undergoes extraction first, then we infuse the bone marrow into Kai that afternoon." Dr. Hoffman paused. "Mrs. Laurent, you seem conflicted about this donor. Any concerns?" How could she explain that her conflict had nothing to do with medical concerns and everything to do with owing an unpayable debt to the man who'd taught her love was dangerous? "It's complicated. Family situations often are. What matters is that when I called this donor, Kai's father, he didn't ask about logistics or compensation. He asked about Kai. How long he'd been sick, what his chances were, whether there was anything else he could do to help." Dr. Hoffman's voice was gentle. "That doesn't sound like someone trying to ease his conscience. That sounds like a father who's discovered he has a son." The next day brought unexpected complications. Kai had begun to notice things. "Mom, is the donor coming to visit me?" he asked as she helped him into a clean hospital gown. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because Jenny's brother visited when he gave her bone marrow. I was wondering if my donor might want to meet me." The question she'd been dreading arrived with innocent directness. "The donor did ask if he could meet you. Would you like that?" Kai's face lit up. "Really? He wants to meet me?" "He does. But Kai, there's something important I need to tell you." She chose her words carefully. "The donor is someone I knew before you were born. Someone I cared about very much, but who made choices that hurt me deeply. His name is Theodore and he's your father." Kai absorbed this with methodical consideration. "My father? My real father?" "Your biological father, yes. But he wasn't here before." "No. He made mistakes that meant he couldn't be part of our lives. But now he has a chance to help you." Kai was quiet for a long moment. "Is that why you've been sad? Because seeing him makes you remember being hurt?" The perceptiveness nearly undid her. "Yes. But I'm grateful he can help you. Can I meet him before the surgery?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Will you be there too?" "If you want me to be. I want you to be." Kai reached for her hand. "Mom? Are you going to be okay?" At 8 years old, while fighting a disease that could kill him, Kai worried about protecting her feelings. "I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. All that matters is making you healthy." That evening she called Theodore. His number, unchanged after 7 years, was still in her contacts. "Anaya?" His voice was cautious, hopeful. "Kai wants to meet you. Before the surgery." Silence stretched so long she wondered if he'd hung up. "Are you sure? I don't want to complicate things." "It's already complicated, Theodore." But he asked. "He deserves to know who's helping him." "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Visiting hours start at 2. I'll be there." Emotion filled his voice. "Anaya? Thank you. I'm doing it for Kai, not for you." "I understand." But as she hung up, she wondered if that was entirely true. Despite everything Theodore had done, part of her, a part she tried to kill, wanted him to meet their son. The next afternoon, as she prepared Kai for Theodore's visit, she remembered the first time she'd imagined this moment. 7 years ago, she'd fantasized about introducing Theodore to their child. In those dreams it had been joyful. She'd never imagined it would happen in a hospital room, with betrayal standing between them like a chasm. "Mom," Kai said, adjusting his hospital gown. Do I look okay? You look perfect. Are you nervous? A little. But excited too. He smiled and she saw Theodore's dimple flash, a genetic echo she'd missed before. I've never had a father. I don't know what to say. Just be yourself. That's more than enough. As they waited, Anaya found herself caught between hope and fear, love and hurt, the past and an uncertain future hanging in the balance of one 8-year-old boy's brave heart. When footsteps stopped outside their door, followed by a gentle knock, she realized they were all about to step into territory none of them had mapped, where DNA meant salvation, where love and betrayal could coexist, and where sometimes the person who broke your heart was the only one who could help put it back together. Come in, Anaya called, her voice steadier than she felt. The door opened slowly, and Theodore stepped into the hospital room like a man walking into his own judgment. He dressed carefully, khakis and a button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed, as if meeting his son for the first time was a job interview for the most important position of his life. His eyes went immediately to Kai, lying propped against pillows in the hospital bed, and Anaya watched as 7 years of theoretical fatherhood became devastatingly real. Hello, Theodore said softly, stopping a respectful distance from the bed. You must be Kai. Hi. Kai studied him with unabashed curiosity, taking in every detail of the stranger who shared his DNA. You're Theodore. I am. Theodore's voice was carefully controlled, but Anaya could see his hands trembling slightly. Your mom told me you're interested in astronomy. Kai's face lit up with the enthusiasm he reserved for his favorite subjects. I'm going to be an astrophysicist when I grow up. I want to discover planets where the grass grows purple and the sky changes colors every hour. That sounds incredible, Theodore said, and his smile was genuine, transforming his nervous features into something warmer. I'd love to hear more about these planets. Really? Kai glanced at his mother for permission, then launched into an elaborate description of his imaginary solar system, complete with gravitational theories and atmospheric compositions that impressed even the adults listening. Anaya watched, mesmerized despite herself, as Theodore listened with complete attention. He asked thoughtful questions, made encouraging sounds at appropriate moments, and never once talked down to Kai or dismissed his ideas as childish fantasies. That's brilliant, Theodore said when Kai finished explaining how purple grass might photosynthesize differently than green grass. You've really thought this through. Mom says I think too much sometimes, Kai said with a grin. There's no such thing as thinking too much about something you love, Theodore replied, and Anaya felt an unwelcome flutter of recognition. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who treated children's dreams with the respect they deserved. Are you really going to help make me better? Kai asked with the directness that characterized all his important questions. Theodore's composure cracked slightly. I'm going to try. The doctors will take some of my bone marrow and give it to you. It should help your body fight the sickness. Does it hurt? A little, Theodore admitted honestly. But they give you medicine so it's not too bad. And it's worth it if it helps you. Kai nodded solemnly, processing this information. Then, with the fearlessness that had always amazed his mother, Are you my dad? The question hung in the air like a live wire. Anaya felt her breath catch, waiting to see how Theodore would navigate this minefield. Biologically, yes, Theodore said carefully. I'm the man who helped create you. But being someone's dad means more than just DNA. It means being there, taking care of them, loving them every day. I haven't done those things. Why not? Kai asked without accusation, simply seeking information. Theodore glanced at Anaya, then back at their son. Because I made some very bad choices that hurt your mother. Choices that meant I couldn't be part of your lives. What kind of bad choices? Anaya tensed, ready to intervene, but Theodore surprised her. I took money that didn't belong to me. Money that was supposed to help sick children like you. I lied to people I loved, and when they found out, I ran away instead of trying to make it right. Kai considered this with the gravity he applied to all complex problems. That was bad. Yes, it was. One of the worst things a person can do. But you're here now. I'm here now, Theodore agreed. Though I understand if you don't want me to be your dad. I understand if you can't forgive what I did. I don't know what forgiveness means exactly, Kai said thoughtfully. But Mom says people can change if they really want to. Did you change? The question clearly hit Theodore hard. His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. I'd like to think so. I've spent 7 years trying to become someone worthy of a second chance. But that's for other people to decide, not me. Mom? Kai turned to Anaya. Do you think people can change? All eyes turned to her, and she realized this was one of those moments that would shape the rest of their lives. Her answer would influence not just how Kai viewed his father, but how he understood concepts of redemption, forgiveness, and second chances. I think, she said carefully, that change is possible, but it has to be proven through actions, not just words. And it has to happen over time. How much time? Kai asked. That depends on how much someone was hurt and how hard the person works to earn back trust. Kai nodded as if this made perfect sense. Then, with the matter-of-fact tone he used for stating obvious truths, well, you're helping save my life. That seems like a pretty good action. Theodore's composure finally crumbled. Tears streamed down his face as he struggled to find words adequate to the moment. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. Does this mean I can call you Dad? Kai asked with hopeful uncertainty. Theodore looked at Anaya, silently asking permission she wasn't sure she was ready to give. Maybe, she said slowly, you could start with Theodore and see how that feels. Dad is something that has to be earned. That's fair, Theodore said quickly. More than fair. They spent the next hour in easier conversation. Theodore had brought his camera, and with Kai's enthusiastic permission he began taking pictures, not formal portraits, but candid shots of Kai explaining his planet drawings, laughing at Theodore's terrible astronomy jokes, showing off the get-well cards from his classmates. Anaya watched from her chair by the window, struck by how natural they looked together. Kai had Theodore's expressive hands, his way of tilting his head when concentrating. But he had her stubborn chin, her tendency to bite her lower lip when thinking hard. Mom, look. Kai called, interrupting her observations. Theodore brought a camera just like the ones real space photographers use. Not quite that sophisticated, Theodore said with a laugh, but it takes pretty good pictures. Want to see some of my work? He pulled out his phone and began showing Kai photographs from various assignments. Children in hospitals, families celebrating small victories, moments of joy captured in difficult circumstances. These are beautiful, Kai said, studying each image with the attention of someone who appreciated artistry. You take pictures of sick kids like me? Sometimes. Their families want to remember the good moments even during hard times. Could you take pictures of me and Mom? For when I get better? The request was so innocent, so hopeful, that it nearly broke Anaya's heart. The idea that her son wanted to document this horrible time, to find beauty in his illness, spoke to an optimism she wasn't sure she possessed. If your mom says it's okay, Theodore said, looking at her questioningly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. For the next 20 minutes, Theodore photographed them together. Anaya reading to Kai, Kai showing her his latest planet drawings, both of them laughing at something silly Kai had said. Natural moments that might have happened in any family if circumstances were different. These are wonderful, Theodore said, showing them the digital images on his camera's display. You two have something special. We're a team, Kai said matter-of-factly. Right, Mom? The best team, she agreed, ruffling his hair. Maybe now we can be a team of 3? Kai suggested with the hopeful pragmatism that characterized his approach to problems. The question hung in the air, loaded with possibilities and complications neither adult was prepared to address. Let's focus on getting you healthy first, Anaya said diplomatically. Everything else can wait. But as visiting hours ended and Theodore prepared to leave, she found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, her son was wiser than both of his parents. I'll see you Thursday morning, Theodore said to Kai, who had grown tired from the excitement of meeting his father. Promise? I promise. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. What if there aren't any wild horses? Kai asked with a sleepy grin. Then domestic horses couldn't keep me away either, Theodore replied, earning a giggle from his son. As Theodore moved toward the door, he stopped beside Anaya's chair. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me meet him, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. You're right, she said. You don't, but he deserves to know you. And if you're going to be part of his life in any way, you need to understand something. I will never let you hurt him the way you hurt me. If you disappoint him, if you make promises you can't keep, if you bring any chaos into his world, I will make sure you never see him again. I understand. Do you? Because being a parent isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about showing up every day even when it's boring or difficult or inconvenient. It's about putting someone else's needs before your own, consistently without recognition or reward. I know I have a lot to prove, Theodore said. But I want to try. If you'll let me. She studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation she'd once fallen for. Instead, she saw exhaustion, hope, and something that might have been genuine humility. "We'll see," she said finally. "Actions, not words, remember?" "Actions, not words," he agreed. After he left, Kai was quiet for a long time, staring at the ceiling with the thoughtful expression he wore when processing complex information. "Mom," he said finally, "do you think he'll really keep his promise? About Thursday?" The question revealed his deeper fear, not just about the surgery, but about whether the father who just entered his life might disappear again. "I think he will," she said, surprised to realize she meant it. "This time I think he'll keep his promise." "Good," Kai said, snuggling deeper into his blankets. "Because I kind of like having a dad even if I can't call him that yet." As she watched her son drift off to sleep, Anaya found herself wondering if healing was possible for all of them. If love could be rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal, if trust could grow in ground that had been scorched by lies. Thursday would bring answers to questions she'd been afraid to ask. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all find their way back to something resembling a family. And if you're wondering whether some people truly deserve second chances, whether love can survive the deepest betrayals, keep watching. Because Thursday's surgery will test everything they think they know about forgiveness, family, and the price of redemption. Thursday morning dawned gray and cold, matching the anxiety that had kept Anaya awake most of the night. She'd arrived at the hospital early, needing to be there when Theodore underwent his procedure, though she couldn't have explained why. She found him in the pre-op area, dressed in a hospital gown and looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. The confident man she'd once known had been replaced by someone humbler, more uncertain. "How are you feeling?" she asked, taking the seat beside his bed. "Terrified," he admitted with a weak smile. "Not about the procedure, about disappointing him. About disappointing you. Just focus on today. The rest we'll figure out later." Dr. Hoffman appeared with his usual calm efficiency. "Ready, Mr. Delacroix?" Theodore nodded, then looked at Anaya. Will you tell him I kept my promise? That I was here." "I'll tell him." The procedure took 2 hours. Anaya spent them in the waiting room, alternating between anxiety about Theodore's safety and amazement that she cared about his well-being at all. When had her hatred softened into something more complicated? Dr. Hoffman emerged with good news. The extraction had gone perfectly, yielding more than enough healthy bone marrow for Kai's transplant. "How is he?" Anaya asked. "Tired, sore but fine. He'll need a few hours to recover before he can see Kai, but everything went exactly as planned." That afternoon, as Kai prepared for his own procedure, Theodore appeared in the doorway, moving carefully but under his own power. "I told you wild horses couldn't keep me away," he said to Kai, who beamed at seeing his father again. "How do you feel?" Kai asked. "Like I got kicked by one of those horses," Theodore admitted, "but it was worth it. The doctors say the bone marrow they took looks perfect for you." "Really? Perfect? Better than perfect. Dr. Hoffman says it's like we were made for each other." Kai's eyes lit up. "We were made for each other. You're my dad." The simple truth of it hit Theodore visibly. Here was this extraordinary child, facing a life-threatening illness with courage that humbled adults, and he was proud to claim Theodore as his father. "Can I hug you?" Kai asked suddenly. "Before they take me for the transfusion?" Theodore looked at Anaya, who nodded permission. He moved carefully to the bed, mindful of his own soreness and Kai's fragile condition, and gathered his son into the gentlest embrace. "I love you," Theodore whispered into Kai's hair. "I know I just met you, but I love you so much already." "I love you too," Kai whispered back, and Anaya felt her carefully constructed walls crack a little more. The transfusion itself was anticlimactic. A simple 4-drip that would introduce Theodore's bone marrow cells into Kai's bloodstream. But the significance was enormous. A father's essence flowing into his son, carrying with it the hope of healing. Theodore stayed throughout the procedure, holding Kai's hand and telling him stories about the photographs he'd taken, the places he'd traveled, the wonders he'd seen through his camera lens. "When I get better," Kai said drowsily as the transfusion continued, "will you teach me to take pictures? If you want to learn, I'll teach you everything I know. Promise?" Theodore glanced at Anaya, understanding the weight of promises in their fragile new dynamic. "I promise," he said solemnly. "And when I make promises to you, I keep them." The next weeks were a careful dance of monitoring, hoping, and waiting. The transplant had been successful. Theodore's cells were engrafting, beginning the complex process of rebuilding Kai's immune system. Color returned to their son's cheeks, appetite to his voice. Theodore visited every day, always checking with Anaya first, always respectful of the boundaries she set. He brought books and art supplies, listened to theories about black holes and wormholes, and gradually earned the trust of a boy who'd learned not to expect much from absent adults. "Mom," Kai said one afternoon as they watched Theodore set up his camera equipment to photograph the sunset from the hospital window, "Theodore's been here every day." "He has. That's what dads do, right? Show up every day." The observation was innocent but pointed. Anaya had defined good parenting as consistency, and Theodore was proving himself consistently present. "Good dads do, yes. So can I call him Dad now?" She looked across the room at Theodore, who was pretending not to listen while he adjusted his camera settings. The man who'd devastated her world was now documenting the beauty in their son's recovery, finding light in the darkest of circumstances. "If you want to," she said finally. "If it feels right to you." "Dad," Kai called out experimentally. Theodore nearly dropped his camera, turning with tears in his eyes. "Yes," he managed. "Could you take a picture of me and Mom by the window? I want to remember this day." "Of course," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd be honored." As he photographed them together, Anaya caught his eye over Kai's head. Something passed between them, not forgiveness exactly but acknowledgement. He was earning his place in their lives one day, one promise kept at a time. 2 months later, Kai was declared to be in full remission. The cancer had retreated, defeated by his father's cells and his own stubborn will to live. The prognosis remained cautiously optimistic, but the immediate crisis had passed. Theodore had used those months to rebuild his relationship with his son and begin the harder work of earning Anaya's trust. He'd moved closer to the hospital, then closer to their neighborhood. He'd started volunteering at a nonprofit that taught photography to at-risk youth. "I can't give back what I took," he told her one evening as they sat in her living room while Kai worked on homework. "But I can try to balance the scales somehow. It doesn't erase what you did." "I know. I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to live with it honestly." They were navigating a relationship that had no clear precedent. Not quite co-parents, not quite friends, something more complex than mere civility. They shared birthday parties and school conferences, medical appointments and bedtime stories. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Anaya wasn't sure she would ever fully forgive the betrayal that had rewritten her understanding of love and safety. But it was something else, an acknowledgement that people could change, that redemption might be possible even for those who seemed beyond it. "I dream about him sometimes," Theodore confessed one night after Kai had fallen asleep during a movie they'd all been watching together. "About the years I missed. I dream about his first steps, his first words." "I can show you videos," Anaya offered impulsively, surprising herself. "You would do that?" "He's your son too." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. "You can't have those years back, but you can know what they looked like." They spent the next hour scrolling through her phone, Kai's first steps, his delighted laughter at a puppet show, his serious concentration building block towers. Theodore watched with the intensity of someone memorizing sacred text. "Thank you," he said when they reached the end. "I know I don't deserve." "Stop. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what Kai deserves. He deserves to have a father who knows his history." "I understand." "Do you? Because if you disappoint him, if you make promises you can't keep, I will make sure you never see him again." "I won't disappoint him," Theodore said quietly. "I won't disappoint either of you. Not again." 6 months passed. Kai remained healthy, thriving in school and in the expanded world that included both parents. Theodore had become a constant presence, not living with them but integrated into their daily rhythms in ways that felt increasingly natural. The boundaries Anaya had carefully maintained were becoming increasingly difficult to enforce. She found herself noticing things she trained herself not to see: the way Theodore's face lit up when Kai ran toward him, the gentleness with which he handled their son's fears about routine medical checkups, the way he'd quietly learned Kai's favorite foods and bedtime preferences. "You've been taking pictures of us," she said one afternoon, discovering a folder of candid shots on his camera. "I'm sorry. I should have asked. I can delete them if—" "No." She scrolled through images that captured moments she'd been too busy living to observe. Kai's concentration as he worked on homework, her own unconscious smile as she watched their son explain something enthusiastically, the three of them sharing pizza with comfortable ease. "They're beautiful." "You're beautiful," he said softly, then immediately looked stricken. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know we have boundaries." "Theodore." She set down the camera and looked at him directly. "What are we doing here? I don't understand this." She gestured between them, encompassing months of careful politeness and growing comfort. We're not just co-parenting anymore. We haven't been for a while. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to read a language he'd once known fluently. I love you, he said finally. I never stopped loving you even when I was destroying everything we had. I know I have no right to say that. You broke my heart. The words came out steady, factual rather than accusatory. You made me question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. I know. You stole from children who needed help. You lied to me every day for months. You disappeared and left me to rebuild my life alone. I know. He didn't look away, didn't minimize or excuse. But you saved our son's life. That doesn't balance the scales. No, she agreed. It doesn't. But it matters. And the way you've been with him these past months matters too. The way you've kept every promise, shown up for every important moment, put his needs before your own, that matters. Anaya. I'm not finished. She took a breath, gathering courage for words she'd been rehearsing in her mind. I spent 7 years hating you. Building walls around my heart, teaching myself that love was dangerous. And then you came back and slowly, despite every reason I had to keep hating you, you showed me who you are now. Not who you were then but who you became. Theodore's eyes filled with tears, but he remained silent. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, she said honestly. I don't know if I can let myself be vulnerable with you the way I was before. But I know that I want to try. For Kai, yes, but also, for us. Are you sure? Because I won't survive losing you twice. I won't survive losing him. I'm not sure of anything, she admitted. Except that pretending we're just co-parents is becoming impossible, and I'm tired of being afraid of my own heart. He reached for her then, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hands cupped her face with reverent care. I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust, he promised. However long it takes, whatever I need to do. I will never hurt you like that again. I know, she said, and realized with surprise that she meant it. When they kissed, it felt like coming home to a house that had been rebuilt from the foundation up, familiar but stronger, the same love transformed by everything they'd survived. Are you feeling the power of second chances right now? The way love can survive even the deepest betrayals when someone is truly willing to change? Hit that like button if you believe people can redeem themselves, and drop a comment telling me about a time when someone surprised you by becoming better than you thought possible. Kai found them there an hour later, sitting close together on the couch, her head on Theodore's shoulder, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her arm. Finally, their son said with exaggerated exasperation, I was starting to think I'd have to draw you a diagram. They laughed, pulling him into the space between them, and Anaya felt something she'd thought was lost forever. The possibility of wholeness, of family, of love that could survive its own destruction and emerge transformed. 1 year later, their small apartment had been transformed. Theodore's photography equipment shared space with Kai's astronomy books. Family photos lined the walls, not just new memories, but carefully curated moments from Kai's early years that Theodore had missed, now displayed alongside recent adventures. The integration hadn't been seamless. There had been arguments about discipline, disagreements about screen time, moments when old wounds reopened without warning. But they'd learned to navigate these challenges together, 3 people figuring out how to be a family. Dad, look at this. Kai called from the kitchen table where he was working on a science project about planetary orbits. At 9 years old, he was thriving, healthy, curious, secure in the love of both parents. Theodore moved to examine Kai's work, offering suggestions with the patience that had become his trademark. Watching them together, Anaya marveled at how natural their relationship had become. Theodore had never tried to make up for lost time with grand gestures or guilt-driven overindulgence. Instead, he'd simply shown up, day after day, becoming the father Kai needed. Mom, Dad says if my project wins the science fair, he'll take us camping so I can see real stars instead of just pictures, Kai announced. That sounds wonderful, Anaya said, though the idea of Theodore keeping such a significant promise still sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. Old habits of protecting herself, and Kai, from disappointment died hard. Theodore caught her expression and understood immediately. Later, after Kai had gone to bed, he brought it up. You're worried about the camping trip, he said as they cleaned up the dinner dishes together, a domestic routine that still felt miraculous after years of single parenting. Not worried exactly. Just aware that promises to children carry extra weight. I know. And I meant what I said. If he wins, hell, even if he doesn't, we're going camping. I've already researched sites with minimal light pollution for the best stargazing. She turned to study his face, looking for the telltale signs of casual commitment that might crumble under pressure. Instead, she found the steady determination that had characterized his approach to rebuilding their family. "You really have changed," she said, more to herself than to him. "Have I? Or did I just finally become the person I was supposed to be all along?" It was a question that had haunted her for months. Was this transformation genuine, or was she seeing what she wanted to see? How could she trust her own judgment when it came to Theodore? "Does it matter?" she asked finally. "Whether you changed or just found yourself?" "It matters to me. Because if I changed, it means I was broken before and I might break again. But if I found myself..." He paused, searching for the right words. "If I found myself, it means this is who I really am. It means you can trust this version of me to last." That night, as they lay in the bed they'd been sharing for 3 months, another carefully negotiated step in their journey back to each other, Anaya found herself thinking about the nature of love and trust. She'd spent so long believing that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. But living with Theodore again, watching him interact with their son, seeing the man he'd become, she was beginning to understand that maybe trust wasn't a glass that shattered irreparably. Maybe it was more like a bone that, when properly healed, could become stronger at the break point. "Theodore," she whispered in the darkness. I need you to know something. About forgiveness." He turned toward her, instantly alert. "Okay. I used to think forgiveness was about forgetting, about pretending the hurt never happened. But that's not what this is." She struggled to find words for feelings she was still processing. "I haven't forgotten what you did. I probably never will. But I've stopped letting it define us." "What does that mean?" "It means I choose to love who you are now instead of punishing who you were then. It means I believe people can grow beyond their worst mistakes." She paused. "It means I trust you with our future even though you broke our past." Theodore was quiet for so long she wondered if he'd fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve this second chance, but I promise you, I will never stop being grateful for it." "Just don't waste it," she said simply. "Never." 3 months later, Kai did win the science fair. His project on planetary orbits earned him first place and a trophy he displayed proudly on his bedroom shelf. Theodore kept his promise about the camping trip, planning every detail meticulously. They drove 3 hours to a designated dark sky area, where light pollution wouldn't interfere with their stargazing. Theodore had borrowed professional-grade telescopes and researched the best viewing times for various celestial objects. "This is incredible," Kai breathed as he peered through the telescope at Saturn's rings. "It's so much better than pictures." "Sometimes the real thing is worth waiting for," Theodore said, catching Anaya's eye over their son's head. They spent hours under the stars, Theodore teaching Kai to identify constellations while Anaya marveled at the peace she felt. Here, away from the complexities of daily life, they were simply a family enjoying time together. "Dad," Kai said as they prepared to return to their tent, "thank you for keeping your promise." "Thank you for giving me the chance to keep it," Theodore replied. Later, as Kai slept in his sleeping bag between them, Anaya and Theodore lay awake talking quietly. "He's going to remember this night for the rest of his life," she said. "I hope so. I want him to have memories of us being happy together." "We are happy, aren't we?" The question surprised her. When had happiness crept back into their lives? "I am," Theodore said without hesitation. "Happier than I ever thought I deserved to be. Even with all the complications? The medical checkups, the careful monitoring, the way people look at us when I have to explain our situation? Especially with all of that. Because it means we're real. We're not some fantasy family where nothing goes wrong. We're people who've been through hell and chose to rebuild something beautiful." She reached for his hand in the darkness, intertwining their fingers. "I love you," she said, the words coming easier now than they had in the beginning. "Not the way I loved you before, that was naive and unconditional. This is different. It's love with eyes wide open, love that knows the cost of betrayal and chooses trust anyway." "Is that better or worse than before?" "It's stronger," she said with certainty. "It's love that can survive anything." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, witnesses to countless human stories of love and loss, betrayal and redemption. Their story was just one among millions, but it was theirs and they had fought for it. As she drifted off to sleep, listening to the steady breathing of her son and the man who had saved his life, who had, in turn, saved all of them, Anaya felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. They had been broken, all of them, in different ways. But they had chosen to heal together, to build something new from the fragments of what had been destroyed. And in that choice they had found not just love, but the deepest kind of happiness, the kind that comes from knowing you've survived the worst and emerged not just intact but transformed. 2 years had passed since that camping trip under the stars. Kai, now 11, was not just surviving but thriving. His latest checkup had shown no signs of cancer, and Dr. Hoffman had begun using words like complete remission and long-term survival with increasing confidence. The boy who had once lain pale and fragile in a hospital bed was now captain of his school's astronomy club, an honor student who still dreamed of discovering purple grass planets but had also developed more earthbound interests like photography, a passion his father had nurtured with patient instruction and unlimited enthusiasm. Theodore had kept every promise he'd made, large and small. The camping trips had become annual traditions. The photography lessons had evolved into father-son adventures, exploring the city with cameras and curiosity. He'd attended every school event, every medical appointment, every ordinary Tuesday evening when Kai needed help with homework. More importantly, he'd kept his promise to Anaya about earning her trust. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when old fears resurfaced, when she'd caught herself waiting for him to disappoint them. But Theodore had met each test with steady consistency, proving himself not through grand gestures but through the accumulation of small daily choices to put their family first. "Mom, Dad," Kai called from the living room where he was sprawled on the floor with his latest astronomy textbook. "Come look at this." They found him pointing at a page about exoplanet discoveries, his eyes bright with excitement. Scientists found a planet where it might actually rain glass. Can you imagine? And another one that's covered in lava oceans. He looked up at them with the enthusiasm that had sustained him through his darkest days. "The universe is so much weirder and more amazing than anything I ever imagined." "Kind of like families," Theodore said, settling on the couch beside Anaya. "Sometimes the most amazing things come from the most unexpected places." "Is that a philosophical statement about our origin story?" Anaya asked with amusement. "Maybe. I've been thinking about how to explain our family to people who ask. Because they do ask, you know. How do you introduce the man who broke your heart but saved your son's life?" It was true. Their unconventional family structure often prompted questions from teachers, parents at school events, new acquaintances who couldn't quite categorize their relationship. The simple labels, husband, wife, father, mother, didn't capture the complexity of what they'd built together. "What do you tell them?" she asked. "That we're a family that chose each other twice. Once before we knew better and once after we learned what love really costs." Kai looked up from his book, his expression thoughtful. "I like that. But I think there's more to it." "Oh? What's your version?" "We're a family that proves love is stronger than mistakes. Even really big mistakes." He grinned at Theodore. "No offense, Dad. None taken. Your version is better than mine anyway." "Of course it is. I'm going to be a scientist. We're trained to be precise." They laughed, and Anaya felt the familiar wash of contentment that had become her default emotional state. This was what happiness looked like, not the desperate, clinging joy she'd once mistaken for love, but something deeper and more sustainable. The happiness that came from building something together, day by day, choice by choice. "I have something to tell you both," Theodore said, his tone shifting to something more serious. Anaya felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, old habits dying hard, but forced herself to remain calm. Theodore had earned the right to be heard without immediate suspicion. "The nonprofit I work with has been offered a grant to expand their program nationally. They want me to head up the expansion." He paused, looking between them. "It would mean traveling more, being away from home several days a month." "That's wonderful," Anaya said, surprised by how genuinely pleased she felt for him. "You've worked so hard for this." "But," Theodore prompted, reading her expression accurately. "No buts. I'm proud of you. This is exactly the kind of work you should be doing." "I haven't said yes yet. Because I meant what I said about putting this family first. If you need me here." "Dad," Kai interrupted, looking up from his book with the practical wisdom that had always made him seem older than his years. "You taught me that sometimes loving someone means supporting their dreams, even when it's hard. Mom supported your dream of being a good father. I think now we should support your dream of helping more kids." Theodore stared at his son with obvious pride and amazement. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just haven't been here long enough to notice." The words could have been accusatory, but Kai delivered them with such matter-of-fact affection that they became simply truth, acknowledged and forgiven. "So we're agreed?" Theodore asked. "I can take the position?" We're agreed, Anaya said. But you have to promise to FaceTime us from every city you visit. Kai wants to see what the stars look like from different latitudes. And you have to bring us souvenirs, Kai added. But not cheesy tourist stuff. I want rocks. Different geological samples from different places. Rocks. Got it. Theodore pulled them both closer on the couch, and they settled into the comfortable pile that had become their family's preferred configuration for watching movies or having important conversations. Can I ask you something? Kai said after a moment. Always, both parents replied simultaneously. Do you think I'll remember being sick? When I'm grown up, I mean. Will I remember being scared, or will I just remember that you saved me? The question caught both adults off guard. They'd been so focused on moving forward, on building their new life together, that they'd rarely discussed how Kai processed his own near-death experience. What do you want to remember? Anaya asked carefully. I want to remember being brave. And I want to remember that love made everything possible. Even when it seemed impossible. He looked between them. I want to remember that families aren't just about who you're born to, but about who chooses to stay. Theodore's eyes filled with tears, a sight that had become familiar and no longer frightened Anaya the way it once had. That's exactly what I hope you remember, he said. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering their small world in pristine white. It was a different snow than the one that had fallen the night Theodore first came back into their lives. That snow had been cold and harsh, full of uncertainty. This snow was gentle, peaceful, a blanket of possibility over the life they'd built together. As they sat watching the snow through their living room window, Anaya realized that this was what redemption looked like. Not a dramatic moment of forgiveness, but the slow accumulation of trust rebuilt one day at a time. Not the erasure of past hurt, but the decision to stop letting that hurt define the future. They had started as two people who loved each other naively, been torn apart by betrayal and loss, and somehow found their way back to something deeper and more resilient. They had added a child to their story, first as a bridge between them, then as the center around which their new family orbited. And now, watching Kai point out the different shapes snowflakes made as they hit the window, listening to Theodore quietly hum a song she remembered from their first life together, Anaya understood that love wasn't just about the feelings you shared. It was about the choice to keep choosing each other, day after day, through sickness and health, through betrayal and forgiveness, through the ordinary moments that made up a life. I love you both, she said, not because the moment demanded it, but because it was simply true. We love you too, Kai said, snuggling deeper between his parents. Forever and always, Theodore added, and this time, Anaya believed him completely. The snow continued to fall, blanketing their world in new beginnings, and inside their warm home, a family that had been broken and rebuilt watched the winter arrive with hearts full of hope for whatever tomorrow might bring. Thank you for joining us for another story here at Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives. If this tale of second chances and the redemptive power of love touched your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you believe people can truly change? Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and opening it to someone who hurt you before? Your stories and insights make our community stronger. And if you know someone who needs to hear that love can survive even the deepest betrayals, share this video. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that healing is possible, that families can be rebuilt, and that the strongest love is the kind that chooses hope over fear. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to transform even the most broken hearts. I'll see you in the next story.